But we've been very fortunate, as Carolyn was just saying, to have had an FTA as thoughtful, as progressive, and as friendly as we've had for the past 8 years. And that doesn't happen by happenstance. It takes in certain ways, a village of advocacy to make sure that an administration like the Federal Transit Administration has a voice and can ensure and participate in partnerships like they have with us for the past 8 years. And sometimes we need to be supportive of those voices that are our representatives. And we have no better representative than the person who helped found Rail Volution as our principal champion in that effort. And as we both thank him and I'll hear some words of wisdom from him about where the state of Rail Volution is going, we should also remind ourselves that no matter what happens after November 8th, that we still need to have champions like this. We still need to have the relationship with an FTA. And so we need to continue to give our voices and our support to our representatives to embolden them to be able to represent and make sure that those relationships stay alive. So I give to you Congressman from 3rd District of Oregon, founder of Rail Volution, Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
Thank you very much, Scott. Madam Administrator, thanks for the great announcements. There are people here buzzing, I am sure. I'm thinking going forward here, Dan, this is the first time I've addressed the second day, or third day of the conference. Usually it's the Monday kickoff, and I'm thinking about that. It's really a problem. Many of my best lines, I'm serious, many of my best lines have been stolen and used probably better than I would have. A third of the audience is either left, gone, hungover, or still partying. It was quite a night. And most important, because of the interaction, you're always at a meeting like this, what you had prepared lovingly, painstakingly, days in advance, isn't quite relevant. So I will make an email copy available to you, any of you who want. There are some good thoughts in there, and there are a few lines that I will weave in. But I do think that the last couple days have really been very exciting for me to watch the conference of doers, Paul, as you're talking about, and what is being done. But before I launch into that, let me just say a word to Dan and the conference, regardless that it's on Tuesday and harder for me, because just a spectacular job is done. The steering committee, the local host committee, the people who work over the course of a year to put together, I think, the premier conference of its type in the country. I'm deeply appreciative of what you all have done. And over the course of the last several years, in evidence here to this week, the commitment to diversity and inclusivity is now foundational of Rail Volution, and I think it makes us more effective, relevant, and frankly, more capable of meeting our mission. 25 years ago, when we started a little conference in a church in Northeast Portland with an obscure guy named Calthorpe, and hoped to get 50, 60 people on one of those rare sunny days in Portland where you could actually go outside, standing only in the back of the church and watching people engage with trying to reshape their community. It was really a remarkable experience, and we've been able to build on that in our community after 4 years trying to help figure out how we would stretch a light rail line, about a C+, I would give the first line, the max line. It was early, there were excuses, to create an A+ model. 25 years ago, we were debating, and I went on the road to places like Phoenix and debating whether their light rail would be a good investment, or Houston, or Honolulu. Today, it isn't a question of whether it makes sense. That's accepted. It works on the ground. People, it's not whether they do it, it's what line comes next. How fast can we grow? How inclusive can we be in that vision? Grace talked about the problems of success. As cities are getting the well-educated and mobile young people coming back, even a few gazer baby boomers like me, we're watching these problems of success create opportunities going forward. Every city has an affordable housing crisis. Every city. But I will tell you, I will take the problems of success and vitality and investment over the problems of disinvestment and despair any day of the week. Some of you have been working your entire professional careers for this moment. The things you've been working on, the proposals you've advanced, the application of technology, it works. But the world's just been turned upside down. Part of it is crazy politics. We'll put that aside. 29 days from now, the sun, as Scott will come out, at least for those of you who aren't in Portland. We will have a new administration, and not to be political, I have a feeling about who I think the next president should be and what her administration should look like. You will have, I will guarantee you, a better Congress. And we'll be facing together how we deal with disruption past the election. There's a lot going on right now. Part of the unease and the angst in the political arena stems from an economic malaise, people who are stuck in place economically, the growing inequality, and a sense of helplessness on the part of some people getting ahead. You hear that manifest in terms of some of the discussion about trade, which is a relatively minor disruptor compared to technology. I mean, we now create, sorry Donald, more steel in the United States than we did in 1980. But we create it with 87,000 people and not almost 400,000 people. And we're not going back to that. We're not going to have people in the United States making plastic shoes or stitching soccer balls. We're moving forward in terms of spreading that economic opportunity. Think for a moment about the disruption that's coming with autonomous vehicles. This reality, if you visit Silicon Valley, if you visit some of the headquarters here, look at what's going on in Pittsburgh, look what's going on in Portland, Oregon. This reality is hurtling down upon us. And in 29 states, the number one category of employment is driver. I haven't been able yet to document this, but I'm willing to bet any of you lunch that the number one category of employment for men with less than a college education is driver. And that's going to be fundamentally changed, not in a matter of decades, but in a matter of years. Now, we're watching things happen at the grassroots level, in community after community. There's going to be over 24 cities voting on about $200 billion in investments. And I will again wager that the majority of them will pass, and pass with fairly comfortable margins. The public is willing to work with us and vote at the ballot box with their wallets. They're voting with their feet. But we've just got 3 problems with the public. 3 things they're concerned about and opposed to: sprawl, density, and change. Any of this sound familiar in your community? Despite our best efforts, these are threatening, and the public doesn't have to be consistent. God knows we aren't in Washington, D.C. They can have these different concerns that they're struggling with. But we need to use the tools developed by Rail Volution and implemented and expanded and refined by so many of you across the country to have a new approach, new techniques, new partnerships. It should start at the federal level. We need to work together to recast the federal partnership. My heart goes out to the administrator. It's harder than it needs to be. I've enjoyed having Ray LaHood at these conferences over the year and working closely with Ray. Anthony Fox stepped in and is doing a great job. And I've heard stories from a number of you in this conference of where creative, thoughtful people at the regional level are using innovative ways to get you part way of where you want to go. But it doesn't need to be this hard. We need to shift to, first of all, not starving the budget of the Department of Transportation and HUD. We ought to be making the investments that all the experts tell us we should, and what people are willing to do at the local level. I've got a pretty simple formula for that. Raise the gas tax, index the gas tax, and then replace the gas tax with a road user charge that is sustainable and effective and fair going forward. Now, we've been arguing that for years. We had it legislatively. Part of that got embedded in the FAST Act. We've got, I think 8 projects now taking the Oregon experiment of the road user charge and expanding it around the country. And we have 4 more years of funding to build on that foundation. Adequate resource, and make the change to a mechanism that we need for the future. Second, we need to be able to unlock the value of assets that you all have that were built, paid for, financed in part or in whole by federal resources. It's too hard for you to be able to unlock and repurpose those assets and capture that value. And I'm looking forward to working with you on legislation that would essentially treat it like a grant. And if you check the right boxes in terms of something that is consistent with the original purpose of the federal resource, and that will advance that vision of the livable community, of transportation, of affordable housing, and is consistent with good, solid, regional plans, that it ought to be almost routine. And we treat it like a community development block grant, and we can do post-audit work to make sure you didn't stretch it too far. And you can't give this to your brother-in-law. It's got to be transparent and competitive. But there are hundreds of billions of dollars that can be repurposed if we think about this creatively. And I would think when I have 26 Republican colleagues in the United States Senate that are willing to embrace devolution of transportation back to the states. This ought not to be a heavy lift. Third, we need to focus the agenda being metropolitan-based, strengthening the role of MPOs, of regional cooperation. This is where the population growth is. This is where congestion is most extreme. This is where we have some of the largest environmental problems. We need to be thinking about more of this partnership being focused on the metropolitan area. And last but not least, it must be welcoming of technology. Well, I think everybody needs to be committed to rebuild and renew and replace and build. And it is not just for transportation. Rail Volution's gone past that. You are keenly aware and advocating for integrating affordable housing into this equation. But we need to extend it to water and sewer systems. Flint, Michigan, anybody? The energy grid and broadband. Think about 10 million or 20 million autonomous vehicles out on the roadways for individual and commercial use. What will be the capacity requirements for broadband for that? And what community is ready to move to that future to make sure that it is flawless, that it has the capacity to have the full potential, and that it will be safe and appropriately functioning? We need to be considering a new dimension to the urban landscape. Think of Jeanette Sadiq Khan on steroids. Okay? Okay? As we cut private car ownership in half, how many thousands of acres of right-of-way can be repurposed in your community? And some of you with an entrepreneurial bent, think about over the next 10 or 15 years, about not dozens, not hundreds, but probably thousands of parking structures that will not generate enough revenue to meet their loan requirements, the bond covenants. Affordable housing, congregate care for us elderly. There are lots of opportunities to be able to move forward. And things that can happen now in your community to get a head start on that. I mean, who's developing a pilot project now, partnering, say, with Lyft, to essentially take over motor pool and parking operations, to be able to repurpose areas that's not going to be necessary for parking and repurpose the savings? This is stuff that you can do tomorrow, and maybe there's a federal grant out there available. Maybe we start with GSA. But I don't want to get ahead of myself here. Because we are hurtling forward to a new future, but at the same time, we will have many people who are locked in to the process of today. The trucks still are going to be needing to deliver product. There are still people who are wedded to their individual vehicle. So in a sense, we've got to do two things at once. We need to be able to maintain, rebuild the existing infrastructure that is creaking around the country, and we need to be able to develop this new vision. Trust me, if we get this equation right, there's not a single family wage job that needs to be lost. In fact, there are many more to be created all along the employment continuum if we are willing to do the right thing. To be able to make tough decisions on revenue, embrace technology, engage people in the citizen infrastructure that is so critical for them going forward. I think Rail Volution is key to this vision. I could not be more excited for you and the opportunities going forward. I could not be more excited thinking about how we work with a better Congress and a new administration to build on this foundation. It's an exciting time, never been a better time to be a revolutionary, and I look forward to being your partner with it. Thank you.
Thank you.